The words hung in the air between us, cold and sharp as shards of ice. "Let's get a divorce," Mark Bowen said, his face a mask of detached indifference. He looked at me as if we hadn't shared a home, a bed, a life for 3 years. As if I were a stranger he'd bumped into on the street. He had no idea that the woman standing before him was not the same one he'd left that morning. He didn't know I had been reborn. In my first life I had believed him. I had been so foolish. He had spun a tale about it being for our daughter Chloe and for me. A tactical divorce, he'd called it. He'd explained that by registering as a single mother, we would qualify for a larger, better apartment in the new military housing block. It was all a strategy, a clever maneuver to secure our future against the rigid housing policies. My love for him and my desperate aching need to believe in the man for whom I'd sacrificed everything had made me agree. I had signed the papers with a trembling hand, trusting his plan, trusting him. I was the one who had found him broken amidst the chaos of that training accident, pulling him from a pile of rubble when everyone else had given up. I was the one who sold my mother's precious jade bracelet, our family's last heirloom, to pay his mounting medical bills, telling myself that his life was worth more than any memory. I had given him every piece of myself, my youth, my devotion, my future. And what did I get in return? Once the apartment paperwork was finalized, he stood before me in our cramped temporary quarters, hand in hand with his beloved, Lena Moore from the cultural troupe. Her smile was a little too sweet, her eyes a little too victorious. He looked me dead in the eye, his own devoid of any warmth or remorse, and said, "It's over, Maya. We're already divorced." The sheer, breathtaking ridiculousness of it all. The betrayal was a physical pain, a wound that festered for months, then years, until it killed me from the inside out. I died not from an illness, but from a broken heart, from the humiliation of realizing I had been a pawn in my own life. Now, granted a second chance, standing in the same living room with the same morning light filtering through the same cheap curtains, I looked at Mark's cold, handsome face and felt nothing but a chilling, crystalline calm. The love that had once burned so fiercely was now ash. The fear was gone. All that remained was a clear, singular purpose: to survive for Chloe. "All right then," I said, a faint, deliberate smile touching my lips. "Mark Bowen, let's get a divorce." A flicker of surprise crossed his features, so brief I might have imagined it. He had expected resistance, tears. He recovered quickly, nodding with a grim satisfaction. "Good. It's for the best." His stride was long and purposeful as we walked out of the military compound side by side, yet he left me to trail behind, carrying our 3-year-old daughter Chloe. She was a warm, sleepy weight in my arms. I felt like an inconvenient piece of luggage, an afterthought. The sun was blindingly bright, and I had to lower my head, the crushing familiarity of the scene making my eyes ache with unshed tears I would no longer allow myself to shed. "Mama," Chloe's soft, milky voice whispered in my ear, "why is Daddy walking so fast?" I tightened my hold on her, breathing in her familiar, comforting scent. I smoothed her dark, silky hair. "Daddy has important things to do, sweetheart. We mustn't bother him." I saw his steps falter for a fraction of a second, his shoulders tensing almost imperceptibly. He heard me. He just didn't care enough to slow down or look back. In my last life, that tiny hesitation would have filled me with a pathetic shred of hope. Now it only confirmed his profound indifference. The journey to the Civil Affairs Bureau was a silent, tense affair. He drove, his focus entirely on the road ahead. I sat in the passenger seat, holding Chloe on my lap, watching the city blur past. I remembered this drive from before, the frantic beating of my heart, the desperate prayers that this was all just a bad dream. This time my heart was still, my mind clear. I was planning. At the bureau, the clerk, a middle-aged man with a weary expression, looked up as we approached. His eyes flickered with recognition when he saw Mark. My husband, no, my soon-to-be ex-husband, pulled out 2 packs of State Express cigarettes from his pocket and slid them across the counter with a practiced ease. "Comrade Wong," Mark said, his tone familiar, almost jovial. "We're here to finalize the divorce." The clerk, Comrade Wong, accepted the cigarettes with a slight nod, tucking them discreetly into a drawer. The transaction was smooth, unspoken. He looked at me, his gaze lingering on Chloe in my arms. "Are you both certain about this? It's a big step." "Yes, we're doing this voluntarily," Mark replied, his voice losing none of its confidence. He didn't even glance my way for confirmation. Comrade Wang's eyes met mine, a silent question in them. In my previous life I had looked away, my eyes swimming with tears, unable to speak. This time I held his gaze and gave a single firm nod. Yes, we are certain. The paperwork was processed with an efficiency that felt both brutal and liberating. The stamp came down on our booklets with a definitive thud. The sound echoed in the quiet room, a period at the end of a short, unhappy sentence. When the fresh, red-stamped divorce certificate was placed in my hands, the paper warm from the printer, I saw the faintest smirk of triumph at the corner of Mark's mouth. He thought he was free. He thought his new, unburdened life with Lena was about to begin. I met his gaze squarely, the coldness in my own surprising even me. Congratulations, Captain Bowen. You got exactly what you wanted. He froze, the smirk vanishing. This wasn't the script. I was supposed to cry, to beg, to make a scene he could later use as proof of my instability. My calmness, my sharp, clear words unnerved him. His brow furrowed in displeasure and confusion. What is that supposed to mean? He asked, his voice dropping, losing its public-friendly tone. I took a step back, holding Chloe tighter, putting a tangible distance between us. It means what it sounds like. Captain Bowen, now that we're divorced, we go our separate ways. You walk your path, I'll cross my bridge. I wish you a brilliant future. Please do not interfere in our lives again. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away, my daughter secure in my arms. Behind me, I heard his sharp, startled intake of breath. Why, where do you think you're going? I didn't look back. I simply raised a hand in a dismissive wave. Somewhere without you. The words were a vow, whispered to the wind and to my own soul. I would never love him again in this life. He and his precious Lena could be entangled in their web of lies forever, for all I cared. Chloe buried her face in my shoulder, her tiny hand clutching my collar. Mama, are we going home with Daddy? She asked, her voice small and confused. A fresh ache, this one purely for her, pierced through my resolve. I kissed her forehead gently, my lips lingering on her soft skin. No, my love. We're going to our new home. A home just for you and me. I walked straight to the bus station, each step feeling heavier than the last, not with sorrow but with the weight of the unknown. In my last life after the divorce I had been utterly lost. It was Mark who, with condescending pity, had arranged for Chloe and me to stay in a damp, dark storage room in the old family block. He'd said it was temporary, just until the new apartment was allocated. I, the fool, had believed him again, enduring the mold, the gossip, the sickness it brought Chloe, all for an empty promise. This time I had a destination in mind. I had done my homework during my sleepless nights, remembering snippets of conversation from my past life. I knew the head of the local neighborhood committee was a man named Mr. Shin, known to be fair-minded and helpful. He was my only hope. The bus ride was a jostling, noisy affair. Chloe fell asleep against my chest, exhausted by the morning's emotions. I stared out the window, watching the imposing buildings of the military district give way to the bustling, crowded streets of the civilian sector. It was like crossing a border into a new country. My country. Finding the neighborhood committee office was easy. It was a modest, single-story building with a faded red star on the door. Taking a deep breath, I adjusted Chloe on my hip and walked in. The office was Spartan, with a few wooden desks and the faint smell of tea and old paper. A man in his late 40s with a kind, intelligent face looked up from a file. This was Mr. Shin. "Can I help you, comrade?" he asked, his voice calm and welcoming. Before I could answer, the door swung open behind me. Mark stood there, his face a thundercloud. He must have followed the bus in his jeep. "Maya, this is ridiculous. You're coming home with me right now," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. He reached for my arm. I flinched away, stepping closer to Mr. Shin's desk. "I am not going anywhere with you." Mr. Shin stood up, his expression turning stern. "Captain Bowen, is there a problem?" Mark forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "No problem, Director Shin. My wife is just upset. We had a small disagreement." "Ex-wife," I corrected him, my voice trembling with a fury I no longer tried to hide. I turned to Mr. Shin, allowing the fear and desperation I felt for Chloe to show on my face. "Director Shin, we just got divorced. Captain Bowen here thinks I should be grateful to move into the damp, windowless storage room he has arranged for me and my daughter. I cannot do that. My child's health is fragile. I have nowhere else to go." The look on Mr. Shin's face transformed from polite inquiry to sharp disapproval. He looked from my tear-filled eyes to Mark's increasingly flushed face. A storage room? Captain Bowen, is this true? Mark spluttered. It's temporary. Just until the new apartment is assigned. He suggested the divorce himself, I added, my voice low but clear. He said it was a trick, a fake divorce, so we could qualify for better housing as a single-parent household. But now, I let the sentence hang in the air, the implication clear. Now the apartment would go to him and his new woman. The scandalous nature of the scheme dawned on Mr. Shin. His lips thinned. As a soldier, you should be setting an example, Captain Bowen, not exploiting policy loopholes. This is a serious breach of conduct. Mark's face turned a mottled red. He was a proud man, a rising star. To be scolded like an errant schoolboy by a local official was a humiliation he had never anticipated. He glared at me, and in his eyes, I saw a dawning, terrifying realization. I was no longer under his control. I will not have a divorced woman and a child living on the streets, Mr. Shin said firmly. Comrade Maya, there is a small courtyard house behind this office. It is simple, but it is clean and dry. You and your daughter may stay there for now. A wave of relief so profound it made my knees weak washed over me. Thank you, Director Shin. Thank you so much. No. Mark roared, his composure finally shattering. She is not staying here. And who are you to decide? Mr. Shin retorted, his voice cold. The divorce certificate is stamped. You have no authority here. Now, I suggest you leave before you cause a scene that will truly damage your reputation. For a long moment, Mark and Mr. Shin stared each other down. Finally, with a sound of pure frustration, Mark spun on his heel and stormed out, the door slamming shut behind him. The silence he left behind was deafening. I leaned against the desk, my legs trembling. The battle was far from over, but the first, most crucial skirmish was won. I had a roof, however humble. I had a sliver of hope. And I had just taken my first step on a path away from Mark Bowen forever. The silence in the small courtyard was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was a clean silence, unbroken by the distant bark of military commands or the low hum of base gossip. It was just me, Chloe, and the whisper of a breeze through the bare branches of the grapevine clinging to the trellis. Mr. Shin had been true to his word. The place was modest. A main room, a tiny side room for sleeping, and a small kitchen with a coal stove. But it was dry, it was clean, and it was ours. Chloe, wide-eyed and tentative, peeked out from the safety of my legs. Mama, is this our house? I knelt down, my eyes level with hers, and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. Yes, my darling. This is our home. Just for you and me. The words felt like a sacred vow. Her small hand slipped into mine, trusting and warm. The weight of the divorce certificate in my pocket felt less like a brand of failure and more like a key. The first order of business was survival. The money I had carefully hoarded from the household allowance Mark grudgingly provided was pitifully small. It wouldn't last a month. Panic, cold and sharp, tried to claw its way up my throat. I pushed it down. I had faced down Mark Bowen. I would not be defeated by a handful of banknotes. I spent the last of my coins on the essentials. Rice, flour, a few eggs and a small piece of pork. As I built a fire in the little stove, the simple rhythmic task grounded me. This was real. The heat from the flames was real. The responsibility of feeding my child was real. It was 1,000 times more honest than the life I had left behind. Later that afternoon, as I was sweeping the cement yard, the wooden gate creaked open. My heart leaped into my throat, a primal fear that it was Mark. But it was our neighbor, Auntie Wei, a woman with a face like a kindly walnut and eyes that missed nothing. She held a bowl of steaming dumplings. "Welcome, welcome," she said, her voice booming in the quiet courtyard. "I heard new neighbors moved in. I'm Auntie Wei just next door. You must be exhausted. Here for you and the little one." Tears pricked my eyes. This simple act of kindness felt like a lifeline. "Thank you, Auntie Wei. I'm Maya and this is Chloe." As Chloe shyly accepted a dumpling, Auntie Wei's gaze grew shrewd. "You're the one, aren't you? The one who stood up to that Captain Bowen." News traveled fast. I nodded, bracing for judgment. Instead she snorted. "Good for you. Men like that, all pride and no heart. My nephew served under him. Said he was colder than a winter drill." She leaned in conspiratorially. And that woman he's always with, Lena Moore from the song and dance troupe? All sugar on the outside, vinegar within. You're better off without the whole mess, dear. Her words were a bomb. I wasn't just a divorced woman. I was a survivor in the eyes of my new community. The next few days were a blur of settling in. I bought a second-hand bicycle with the last of my money, my most valuable asset now. It was on my third trip to the market, bargaining for every scrap that the idea came to me. It was a memory from my first life, a flicker of comfort in my final lonely days. I'd been so ill I couldn't keep anything down, except for a little rice porridge topped with a sweet and spicy sauce I'd concocted out of desperation. The nurses had loved it, begging me for the recipe. Selling chili sauce. The thought ignited in my mind like a struck match. It was something I could do. It required little startup cost, just chilies, garlic, sugar, and soybean paste. It was a skill that was uniquely mine, born not from duty to a man, but from my own ingenuity. I poured the last of my funds into buying ingredients. Back in my little kitchen, I washed and dried the vibrant red chilies, their fiery scent tickling my nose. I peeled garlic cloves, their pungent smell a promise of flavor. The rhythmic pounding of the chilies and garlic in the stone mortar was a cathartic release of all my pent-up frustration and fear. I was not just making sauce, I was building a foundation. As the mixture simmered in the pot, a rich, complex aroma filled the courtyard, tangy, sweet, and with a slow-building heat. It was the smell of possibility. Auntie Wei appeared at the door again, sniffing the air like a delighted bloodhound. Heavens, child! What is that smell? It's making my mouth water. I smiled, scooping a little onto a spoon for her to taste. Her eyes widened. Why, this is incredible. You could sell this. Seriously, this is better than anything in the state store. Her genuine enthusiasm sealed my resolve. The following afternoon I made my plan. I steamed a batch of plain buns and filled a dozen clean, recycled glass jars with the glistening red sauce. My hands trembled as I packed them into the bicycle basket. This was it. My first battle in the war for our independence. I chose the gates of the large cotton mill. When the shift ended, a river of women in blue overalls poured out, their faces tired but animated. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was an outsider, a nobody with a strange product. I laid out my cloth, arranged the jars and set out the torn bun pieces, each dabbed with a sample of sauce. I didn't shout. I stood quietly, my belief in my product my only advertisement. For a long, agonizing time people streamed past. Then a group of 3 women paused. One with a kind, curious face pointed. What's this? It looks interesting. My chance. I offered her a sample with a smile. Homemade sweet and spicy sauce. Please try it. Her friend tugged her arm. Don't eat strange things. But the first woman took the bite. Her expression transformed from curiosity to delight. Oh, this is wonderful. Sweet first, then a little kick. Try it you too. The ice was broken. In 15 minutes all my jars were sold. As I counted the money, 13 yuan and 50 fen, my vision blurred with tears. It was the most honest money I had ever earned. It was then I heard the voice, sharp and laced with mockery. Well, if it isn't the former Mrs. Bowen. How the mighty have fallen. I turned. Lena Moore stood there arm in arm with a slick-looking man I didn't recognize. Her smile was a venomous curve. A year ago her gaze would have made me crumble. Now I straightened my spine and met her eyes calmly. Comrade Lena. You've made 2 mistakes. Her smile faltered. Oh. One, I said, my voice clear and carrying. I am not the former Mrs. Bowen. We are divorced. My name is Maya. I let the word divorced hang in the air, and I saw the interest spark in the eyes of the women still lingering nearby. And 2, I continued, my gaze flicking to her companion, I earn my living with my own hands. It's called ability. It's far more honorable than scheming for things that were never yours to begin with. Lena's face flushed a blotchy red. The man beside her looked uncomfortable. You shut your mouth, she hissed, her composure shattered. Aren't you always with Captain Bowen? I asked innocently. Who is this comrade? Aren't you going to introduce us? She looked like a cat caught in the rain, utterly flustered. With a final, furious glare, she yanked the man's arm and scurried away, the picture of humiliation. The women around me chuckled. Good for you, Maya, one of them said. Ignore trash like that. We'll be back for more sauce tomorrow. As I rode home, the evening sun warm on my back, I felt a strength I hadn't known was possible. I had faced my enemy and won. I had earned my keep. But as I turned into my alley, the feeling evaporated. Parked by my gate was Mark's military jeep. He was leaning against it, still in uniform, his arms crossed. His expression wasn't angry this time. It was something else, confused, frustrated, and deeply unsettled. He watched me approach, his eyes taking in the empty baskets on my bike. "So it's true," he said, his voice low. "You've really lowered yourself to being a street vendor." I brought the bike to a stop, my body tense. "I've raised myself to being self-sufficient, Captain Bowen. There's a difference." He pushed off the jeep and took a step toward me. The air between us crackled. "Maya, someone has reported me. Me and Lena. To the party committee." I kept my face a careful blank. "Is that so?" "It's an anonymous report," he said, his eyes searching mine for a flicker of guilt. "The timing, right after the divorce. Do you know anything about it?" I held his gaze without flinching. "I don't. But perhaps it was someone who couldn't stand watching you two flaunt your relationship." The truth was, I hadn't reported him. But karma, it seemed, had its own schedule. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of agitation. "It's serious, Maya. My career, it could be over." A cold smile touched my lips. "And what does that have to do with me?" His composure broke. "We were married. Do you have to be so heartless? I need your help." "Pie help?" The audacity was breathtaking. "You need to come with me to the committee," he pleaded, desperation creeping into his tone. "Tell them the divorce was a mistake, that we're reconciling. If we're back together, the report falls apart. They'll clear me." I stared at him, this man I had once loved, and saw only a pathetic stranger. He saw me not as a person but as a tool to be used for his convenience. "Mark Bowen," I said, my voice quiet but absolute. "Listen carefully. I will not help you. Your career is your problem. There will be no reconciliation. And if you bother me again, I will go to the committee myself and confirm every detail of that report." I didn't wait for a response. I pushed my bike past him, unlocked my gate, and stepped into the sanctuary of my courtyard, closing the door firmly on his stunned, desperate face. I slid the bolt across with a definitive thud. The sound echoed the stamp on the divorce certificate. It was the sound of an ending and a beginning. He was gone. But the echo of his desperation lingered. I had won this round, but I knew with a cold certainty that his pride was wounded, and a wounded animal is the most dangerous kind. My freedom was still fragile, and the battle was far from over. The silence after Mark left was profound. I leaned against the bolted wooden gate, the rough-hewn planks cool against my back, and listened to the sound of his Jeep engine fading into the distance. My heart wasn't pounding with fear or exhilaration. It was beating a steady, determined rhythm. I had drawn a line in the sand, and he had finally, truly crossed to the other side. Chloe, who had been watching from the doorway to our main room, her little face pinched with worry, ran to me and wrapped her arms around my legs. "Mama? Is the angry man gone?" I scooped her up, holding her tight. "Yes, my love. He's gone. And he's not going to bother us again." I hoped it was a promise I could keep. The next morning I awoke with a new clarity. Mark's attempt to drag me back into his mess had been the final twisted confirmation that I was on the right path. His world was one of manipulation and salvage. Mine would be one of creation. The money from my first day of sales was a sacred sum. I didn't hoard it like a dragon with its gold. Instead, I saw it as seed capital. I went back to the market and invested every last fin, buying 3 times the amount of chilies, garlic, and spices. I even splurged on a larger, heavy-bottomed pot that wouldn't scorch the sauce, and 50 clean uniform glass jars from a wholesaler. It felt like a monumental purchase, a declaration of intent. I also bought a length of cheap white cloth and a pot of black ink. With careful, deliberate strokes, I painted 3 characters: Maya's chili sauce. Tying it to a bamboo pole, I had my flag. The work was backbreaking. My back ached from hours of pounding chilies in the mortar, my eyes stung from chopping onions and garlic, and my hands were stained a faint, spicy red. But as I stirred the vast, bubbling pot, watching the ingredients meld into that glorious, fragrant crimson, I felt a profound sense of peace. This was my sweat, my effort. The aroma that filled my little courtyard was the smell of our future. Auntie Wei became my unofficial promoter. She took a jar to her sewing circle, and the next day 2 of her friends were at my gate, money in hand. The women from the cotton mill spread the word. Soon I wasn't just selling at the factory gates. Neighbors began to stop by, curious about the incredible smell. My small stall became a tiny hub of activity. I learned to chat, to remember names, to ask after children. I was no longer just Captain Bowen's ex-wife. I was Maya, the sauce lady. The identity fit me better than any other I had ever worn. One afternoon, as I was labeling a fresh batch of jars, a long black official car I didn't recognize pulled up to the mouth of our alley. My blood ran cold. Had Mark used his influence to cause trouble? But the man who stepped out was not a military officer. He was in his 50s, dressed in a well-cut but simple Mao suit, with an intelligent, assessing gaze. He was accompanied by a younger man carrying a briefcase. They walked directly to my courtyard gate. Auntie Wei, who had been shelling peas on her doorstep, shot me a wide-eyed look. "Are you Comrade Maya?" the older man asked, his voice polite but firm. "I am," I said, wiping my hands on my apron, my heart thudding against my ribs. He offered a slight smile. "I am Director Lee, chairman of the Workers' Union at the cotton mill. I have been hearing remarkable things about your product from our staff." Relief washed over me so powerfully I had to steady myself against the doorframe. This was not trouble. This was something else. He gestured to the jars lined up on my makeshift table. "Hey, Of course." I opened a fresh jar and offered him a small spoon. He tasted it thoughtfully, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded, a genuine smile breaking through his official demeanor. "Exceptional. Truly. A complex flavor profile. Sweet, tangy, spicy, it awakens the palate." He handed the spoon to his assistant, who also sampled it and nodded in vigorous approval. "Comrade Maya," Director Lee continued, "our factory cafeteria serves thousands of meals every day. We are always seeking ways to improve the quality and variety for our workers. We would like to propose a trial supply agreement. We would start with 20 jars per day for our condiment stations." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. 20 jars per day. It was an order larger than my entire weekly production. My little pot, my courtyard kitchen, they were utterly inadequate. I must have looked stunned because Director Lee's smile softened. "This is a significant opportunity. We understand it may require you to scale up your operations. We are prepared to offer a fair price and a 6-month contract to give you stability." He named a price per jar that was more than fair. It was generous. My mind raced. This was the golden opportunity one had barely dared to dream of. But it was also a cliff edge. To meet this demand, I would need a proper workspace, equipment, help. I would need to become a business owner, not just a vendor. The fear was a cold knot in my stomach. But as I glanced at Chloe, sitting contentedly in the shade of the grapevine, stacking little stones, I knew I had to jump. I took a deep breath, meeting Director Lee's gaze squarely. "Thank you, Director Lee. This is an incredible honor. I accept your proposal." We shook hands, a formal seal on the agreement. As the black car pulled away, Auntie Wei rushed over, her face alight with excitement. "A factory contract. Maya, you've hit the big time." But my excitement was quickly tempered by panic. Where would I do this? How? I thought immediately of Mr. Shin. He had been my first benefactor. Perhaps he could be my second. I went to the neighborhood committee office the next morning, the signed contract tucked carefully in my bag. Mr. Shin listened as I explained, his eyes widening with each sentence. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. "Comrade Maya," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "You are a force of nature. From a storage room to a factory supplier in a matter of weeks. This is the kind of initiative our new economy needs." He stroked his chin, thinking. Space. Space is the problem. The old soy sauce and vinegar factory out back. It's been derelict for years. It's a mess, but the building is sound and the yard is large. More importantly, the big cooking vats are still there. They'd need a fierce cleaning, but they could be perfect for you. My heart leaped. A real factory? He took me to see it. The place was a wilderness of weeds and crumbling brick, but when we pushed open the heavy doors to the main workshop, I saw it. Under layers of grime and dust were 3 massive iron woks, built into brick stoves. They were magnificent. "It's perfect," I breathed, my mind already envisioning it clean and bustling. We can arrange a very low rent for the first year, Mr. Shin said. Consider it the committee's investment in a local success story. It was happening. It was really happening. As we walked back to his office to discuss the paperwork, a familiar, hated figure emerged from a side street. It was Mark's mother. Mrs. Bowen was a small, sharp-faced woman who had never approved of me. She looked me up and down, her lips pursed in a familiar expression of disdain, but her eyes held a new, unsettling emotion: panic. Maya, she said, her voice tight. We need to talk. Mrs. Bowen, I replied coolly. I'm rather busy. This is about Mark's future, she hissed, stepping closer. This foolishness with the committee investigation, it will ruin him. You have to put a stop to it. I have no power over Army disciplinary matters, I said, turning to walk away. She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. You have all the power, she spat. You can tell them it was all a misunderstanding. That you were jealous, that you made it up. He's your husband. I wrenched my arm free. He was my husband. We are divorced. His problems are of his own making. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a business to run. Her face crumpled from anger into something like desperation. He's miserable, Maya. That woman Lena, she's dropped him. His career is in tatters. If you have any heart left, you'll help him. I looked at this woman who had always made me feel small, and I felt nothing but a distant pity. The time for me to have a heart for Mark Bowen has passed, I said softly. My heart belongs to my daughter and my future now. Goodbye, Mrs. Bowen. I left her standing there, a small, furious figure shrinking in my periphery as I walked back into the committee office with Mr. Shen. The final tie to my old life had been severed, not with a shout but with a quiet, firm goodbye. Sitting in Mr. Shen's office, signing the lease for the old factory, I felt a sense of scale I never had before. My battles were no longer just about survival or defiance. They were about building something that would last. The sauce had been my salvation. Now it was becoming my legacy. The crucible of opportunity had tested me and I had not melted. I had been forged. Signing the lease for the old soy sauce factory was one thing. Taming it was another. The following week was a baptism of fire, dust and sheer back-breaking labor. The place was a tomb of neglect. Weeds as tall as my waist choked the courtyard. Inside, the 3 massive iron walks were scabbed with rust and decades of grime. The air was thick with the smell of decay. But I looked at those giant walks and I didn't see ruin. I saw potential. I saw my future bubbling in them. I used the advance from the cotton mill contract to hire 2-day laborers. A pair of quiet, strong brothers from the countryside who didn't ask questions, just worked with a steady, relentless energy. Together we attacked the wilderness of the yard, clearing the weeds and sweeping years of debris from the main workshop. The sound of our shovels and brooms was the sound of rebirth. The walks were the biggest challenge. I spent a full day on just one, on my hands and knees, scrubbing with abrasive salt and vinegar until my fingers were raw and the water in my bucket was black. But slowly the rust gave way to pitted but clean iron. It was grueling, mind-numbing work. At the end of each day I would stumble back to my little courtyard, my body aching in places I didn't know could ache, and collapse onto my bed. Chloe would pat my face with her small, cool hands, her brow furrowed with concern. "Mama tired." "I am, baby," I'd whisper, pulling her close. "But it's a good tired." Auntie Wei, bless her, became our guardian angel. She would often take Chloe for a few hours, feeding her dinner and letting her play with the other children in the alley, giving me precious extra time to work. The community, once a source of potential judgment, had become a network of quiet support. The woman who sold me vegetables would save her best chilies for me. The man at the coal yard gave me a fair price on fuel for the furnaces. I was no longer just a divorced woman. I was a local entrepreneur and they were rooting for me. Finally, the day arrived for my first production run in the new space. I had hired my first real employee, a young woman named Xiaoling who had been laid off from a textile mill. She was shy but clever and had a desperate need for the work. I trusted her because Mr. Shin had vouched for her family. We lit the furnace beneath the first giant wok. The fire roared to life, its heat a palpable force in the cavernous room. As the oil heated, I began adding the mountains of chopped chilies and garlic. The aroma that erupted was unlike anything from my little pot. It was immense, a cloud of spicy perfume that billowed out of the factory doors and into the alley. A small crowd gathered, drawn by the smell. For hours Xiaoling and I stirred the vast bubbling sea of red with long wooden paddles. Sweat poured down our faces, stinging our eyes. It was hot, grueling work, but there was a rhythm to it, a primal satisfaction. We were conjuring something from nothing. We filled over 100 jars that first day, lining them up on newly built wooden shelves. They gleamed like rubies in the afternoon light. As I wiped the sweat from my brow, looking at the fruits of our labor, a profound sense of accomplishment settled over me. I had built this. Me. The delivery to the cotton mill cafeteria the next morning was a moment of high anxiety. Director Lee himself was there to receive it. He watched as the cafeteria workers unpacked the jars and placed them on the long tables. At lunchtime I lingered, hidden near the doorway, watching the stream of workers. I saw a woman dollop a generous spoonful onto her rice. She took a bite, paused, and then turned to her friend, saying something that made them both nod vigorously. A wave of relief so strong it made me lightheaded washed over me. It was a success. But triumph, I was learning, is often a prelude to crisis. It happened a week later. I was in the factory, calculating my next ingredient order, when Xiaoling came running in, her face pale. "Auntie Maya. It's officials." 3 men in severe suits stood in my courtyard. They introduced themselves as inspectors from the District Hygiene Bureau. Their leader, a man with a thin, unsmiling mouth named Comrade Gao, held up a badge. "We have received a complaint," he said, his voice like chipping ice. "An anonymous report regarding unsanitary and unlicensed food production at this location." My heart stopped. An anonymous report. I knew with a cold certainty who was behind it. Mark. Or perhaps Lena. This was their retaliation. Comrade Gao and his men stalked through the factory, their eyes missing nothing. They pointed at the exposed brickwork, the dusty corners we hadn't yet reached, the drainage channel in the floor. They made notes on clipboards, their pens scratching like accusations. "This facility is not up to code," Comrade Gao announced, his tone final. "There is no license displayed. The preparation area is open to contaminants. This operation is shut down, effective immediately. You will cease all production and sales until you have passed a full inspection and obtained the proper permits." The words were a death sentence. The cotton mill contract had deadlines. If I missed a delivery, they would cancel. My reputation would be ruined before it even began. The investment I had made, the ingredients, the jars, the coal, Xiaoling's wages, would be lost. I would be bankrupt, back to zero. Panic threatened to choke me. I saw all my hard work, all my hope, crumbling to dust. I wanted to scream, to cry, to plead. But I remembered the look on Mark's face when I had stood up to him. I remembered the feeling of the divorce certificate in my hand. I had faced down worse than a bureaucrat with a clipboard. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to remain calm and respectful. "Comrade Gao, I understand your concerns completely. Public health is paramount. However, I would like to respectfully point out that I am in the process of applying for all the necessary permits through the local neighborhood committee. Director Shen is assisting me." I gestured to the sparkling clean woks, the neatly stacked jars. "As for sanitation, we strive for the highest standards. Every jar is sterilized. Every ingredient is washed. We may be a new operation, but we are a conscientious one. The complaint you mention, I suspect it may be malicious. A personal grudge, not a matter of public safety." Comrade Gao's expression did not soften, but a flicker of uncertainty crossed his eyes. He was a man who dealt in facts, and the factory, while rudimentary, was not the pest-ridden hovel a complaint might have suggested. "Malicious or not, the regulations are clear," he said, but his tone was less absolute. "You cannot operate without a license." "Then I will get one," I said, meeting his gaze squarely. "But Comrade Gao, shutting me down now would mean breaking a contract with the cotton mill. It would put my employee out of work. It would waste good food. Would it be possible to allow me to continue under your supervision while my application is processed? You could inspect us weekly, unannounced. I have nothing to hide." It was a gamble. I was asking for a chance, appealing to his reason over his rulebook. The silence stretched. I could hear my own heart beating. Finally he glanced at his colleagues, then back at me. "1 week," he said curtly. "I will return in 1 week. If the permits are not in progress and if I find a single violation, this place will be padlocked. Is that clear?" It was not a reprieve, but it was a stay of execution. Perfectly clear, Comrade Gao. Thank you. They left and my knees buckled. I leaned against the warm brick of the furnace, trembling. Xiaoling looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. What do we do, Auntie Maya? I pushed myself upright. We do what we always do, Xiaoling. We work. I went straight to Mr. Shin's office. He listened, his face growing grim. A hygiene inspection? So soon? He sighed. It seems your ex-husband still has some fight in him. And some friends in low places. He immediately began making phone calls, pulling files, writing letters of introduction. The bureaucracy was a labyrinth, but Mr. Shin knew every twist and turn. For the next 7 days we operated under a microscope. I cleaned every surface until it shone. I implemented strict new rules. Hairnets, clean aprons, designated washing stations. I documented every step of our process. I was not just making sauce. I was building a case for my own legitimacy. The day Comrade Gao returned, I was ready. I presented him with the paperwork from the committee, stamped and signed, showing my license was pending. I showed him my new hygiene protocols. I showed him the logbook of our ingredient sources. He conducted his inspection in silence, his face unreadable. He ran a finger along the rim of a wok, checking for dust. There was none. He examined the jars. They were pristine. Finally he nodded. The improvements are adequate. The application is in order. You may continue operations. He almost but not quite smiled. Your sauce is quite popular with my wife, you know. She bought a jar at the market. And just like that, the crisis was over. The threat that had felt like an avalanche became a pebble in my path. As Comrade Gao drove away, I didn't feel elation. I felt something deeper, more solid. I had faced a threat to everything I had built and I had not broken. I had negotiated. I had adapted. I had prevailed. That evening, as I sat in my courtyard with Chloe, listening to her chatter about her day, I realized the taste of this victory was different from the first sale. That had been the sweet taste of hope. This was something richer, more complex. It was the bold, undeniable taste of my own strength. Mark Bowen had tried to break me with a piece of paper once and he had failed. He had tried again with an anonymous report and he had failed even more spectacularly. He was learning a hard lesson. The woman I had become was far stronger than the girl he had left behind. The approval from the Hygiene Bureau was more than just a permit. It was a seal of legitimacy. News of the confrontation, filtered through Auntie Wei's dramatic retellings, spread through the neighborhood. I was no longer just the plucky divorcee with a good sauce recipe. I was Maya, the businesswoman who had stared down a government inspector and won. A quiet respect settled around me in my little factory. With the threat of shutdown lifted, business blossomed. The cotton mill order was steady, but now individual orders poured in from other factory canteens, and even a few small state-run grocery stores. The 100 jars a day I'd been so proud of soon became 200, then 3. The rhythmic chopping of garlic and the thunderous bubbling of the giant woks became the soundtrack of my life. I hired 2 more women from the neighborhood. Sister Gua, a widow with a fierce work ethic and a surprisingly bawdy sense of humor, and Young Fun, whose hands were quick and careful for sealing jars. My tiny workforce of 4 became a small, efficient unit. The factory, once an echoey shell, now hummed with activity and chatter. We started a small vegetable patch in a sunny corner of the yard, growing our own cilantro and scallions. The place was putting down roots and so was I. Chloe thrived. The timid shadow of a girl she'd been was gone, replaced by a confident, curious 5-year-old who treated the factory as her personal kingdom. The workers adored her, sneaking her tastes of sweet bean paste and letting her help by placing labels crookedly on jars. She started calling Mr. Shin Grandpa Shin, and he would often swing by in the afternoons, supposedly on committee business, but always with a piece of rock sugar or a small toy for her in his pocket. We were building a family not of blood but of choice and loyalty. It was this newfound peace that made the threat when it came so much more terrifying. It was a Tuesday market day. The factory was a whirlwind of activity, preparing a large order for a new client. Chloe was playing in the yard within sight, chasing a butterfly near the gate. I was inside, overseeing the filling of a particularly large batch, my attention fully consumed by the precise level of sauce in each jar. A sudden sharp cry from outside, Chloe's cry, sliced through the factory's noise. My heart seized. I dropped the ladle and ran out into the yard. A man was standing at the open gate holding Chloe by the arm. He wasn't hurting her, but his grip was firm and she was crying, trying to pull away. He was tall, dressed in a shabby suit with a face I didn't recognize. But the look in his eyes, a cold, calculating avarice, was chilling. "Let go of my daughter," I shouted, rushing forward. The man didn't flinch. "Maya Bowen?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "Who are you? Let her go now." I was inches from him, my body trembling with a protective fury I had never known. "My name is not important," he said smoothly. "But my client is very interested in your well-being. And the well-being of this pretty little girl." He gave Chloe's arm a slight squeeze and she whimpered. "What client?" I demanded, my mind racing. "Mark, Lena." This felt different, dirtier. "A business rival," the man said, his lips curling into a nasty smile. "Your sauce is cutting into their profits. They suggest it might be healthier for you, and for her, to scale back your operations. Perhaps find a different line of work." It was an outright threat. Extortion. The success I had fought for, bled for, had attracted a new kind of predator. The fear was ice in my veins, but the anger was a fire. They had threatened my child. Just then Sister Gua emerged from the factory holding a heavy wooden paddle like a club. Fum was behind her, her face pale but determined. Shaoling had already slipped out the back, I later learned, to fetch Mr. Shen. "You let that child go, you filthy worm," Sister Gua bellowed, brandishing the paddle. The man, startled by the sudden appearance of my reinforcements, loosened his grip for a fraction of a second. It was all I needed. I lunged forward, snatched Chloe from his grasp and shoved her behind me. "Get out," I snarled, my voice low and venomous. "You tell your client that if they ever come near me or my daughter again, I will not go to the police. I will come for them myself. And I have nothing left to lose." I meant every word. The man saw it in my eyes. The cold confidence drained from his face, replaced by unease. He took a step back, holding up his hands. "This was just a friendly warning." "It was your last one," I said. At that moment Mr. Shin arrived, breathless, with 2 members of the local Public Security Bureau. The thug took one look at the uniforms and melted away into the alley, disappearing as quickly as he had come. I held Chloe, who was sobbing, into my neck and shook uncontrollably. The incident was over in minutes, but it left a deep scar. Success was not a shield, it was a target. Mr. Shin was furious. "This is outrageous. We will find out who is behind this." He posted a watch from the neighborhood committee for the next few nights. The threat forced me to evolve again. I hired a retired, no-nonsense security guard, Old Wang, to keep watch during the day. I invested in a strong lock for the gate and made sure Chloe was never out of sight. The world was not a safe place, and my primary duty was to protect our little kingdom. It was this hardened, vigilant version of me that Mark Bowen encountered when he came to see me for what would be the final time. He showed up at the factory gate a week later. He looked diminished. His uniform was gone, replaced by civilian clothes that hung loosely on his frame. His handsome face was gaunt, etched with lines of bitterness and defeat. The aura of command that had once surrounded him had completely evaporated. "Maya," he said, his voice raspy. Old Wang moved to block him, but I gestured for him to stand down. I walked out to meet Mark, leaving the safety of my gate. I wanted him to see me here on my territory, surrounded by the evidence of my life without him. "What do you want, Mark?" I asked, my tone flat. He looked past me at the busy factory, at the women working, at the rows of gleaming jars. A painful mix of emotions crossed his face: incredulity, envy, and a deep, gnawing regret. I heard about what happened with that man and Chloe," he said, unable to meet my eyes. "Are you both all right?" "We're fine," I said curtly. "We can take care of ourselves." He flinched. I was discharged. Not honorably. The word seemed to cost him everything. "Lena, she's gone. Married some businessman from the south." I said nothing. I just watched him, this stranger who had once been the center of my universe. "I was a fool, Maya," he whispered, his voice cracking. "A blind, arrogant fool. I threw away the only real thing I ever had." His eyes were red-rimmed, pleading. "I regret it. Every day. I miss you. I miss Chloe." He took a step forward, a desperate hope kindling in his gaze. "Let me help you." With the business. I can be your protector. I can. No, I cut him off, my voice like iron. The word hung in the air, absolute and final. His hope shattered. Maya, please. Forgive me. Give me a chance to make it right. I looked at him and I felt not hatred, not even pity, but a vast, empty distance. The love, the pain, the betrayal. It was all part of a story I had finished reading long ago. Mark, I said, my voice quiet but clear. There is nothing to forgive because there is nothing left. You are a chapter 1 closed. This, I gestured to the factory, to my life, is my story now. And you have no place in it. I turned and walked back through the gate. Old Wang closed it firmly behind me. I didn't look back. I heard a choked, ragged sound, a sob of utter defeat, and then the sound of his footsteps retreating. He was gone. Truly finally gone. The ghost that had haunted my new life had been laid to rest. The threat to Chloe had shown me the ferocity of a mother's love. And Mark's final pathetic appearance had shown me the full measure of my own strength. I had not just survived him, I had surpassed him in every way that mattered. The roots of my new life had been tested by storm and shadow, and they had held fast. They were deep enough now to weather anything. 5 years. The passage of time is a strange alchemy. It can grind down mountains and yet, in the same breath, allow a sapling to become a forest. 5 years ago I was a ghost in my own life, clutching my daughter and a divorce certificate, stepping into a dusty, silent courtyard with nothing but a suffocating fear. Today I stood at the doorway of that same courtyard, watching the morning sun dapple the flagstones, and listened to the sound of my world. It wasn't silent anymore. The sound was a steady, rhythmic hum coming from the building next door, the former soy sauce factory, now officially registered as Meiya Foods. The clinking of glass jars on the conveyor belt we'd installed last year, the low murmur of 24 female employees, the distant rumble of the delivery truck being loaded. It was the sound of a heartbeat. My heartbeat. Chloe, now a lively 8-year-old with my stubborn chin and a laugh that could light up a room, came skidding out of the house, her school bag bouncing on her back. Mama, Grandpa Shin says he's taking me for noodles after school. Can I go? Please. I smiled, smoothing down her hair. Of course you can. But homework first, little sparrow. Deal. She chirped, planting a quick kiss on my cheek before dashing off towards the factory's side gate, where old Wang, our security guard turned beloved uncle, was waiting to walk her to school. I watched her go, my heart a complex knot of pride and wonder. She had no memory of the damp storage room, of the man who walked too fast and never looked back. Her world was this vibrant, busy compound, filled with the spicy sweet aroma of our sauce and the protective, affectionate presence of the community we had built. She was rooted here, in this soil we had tilled together. My morning rounds through the factory were a ritual I never tired of. Sister Gua, now my production manager, met me at the door with a clipboard and a no-nonsense expression that belied the twinkle in her eye. The new batch for the provincial export order is on schedule. But we're low on Sichuan peppercorns. The supplier is trying to raise the price again. Tell him we'll take our business to his competitor in the next county, I said, glancing at the vats where the sauce bubbled, a deep, fragrant crimson. Remind him who his biggest client is. Sister Gua grinned. That's my girl. She had been the first to call me boss, and the title, once so foreign, now felt as comfortable as my own skin. The business had grown in ways I'd never imagined. What started as jars for factory canteens was now on shelves in cooperatives across 3 provinces. We'd even secured a small but prestigious export contract to a Chinese grocery in San Francisco. Meiya Lajiang was a recognized brand. I had a proper office now with a desk and filing cabinets and a photograph on it. A picture of Chloe and me taken last spring, our faces pressed together, smiling so hard our eyes were scrunched shut. The success had brought a different kind of peace. The anonymous threats had stopped years ago, the rival business having folded without its dirty tactics. The world, it seemed, respected strength more than it preyed on vulnerability. I was no longer just surviving, I was thriving. It was on a quiet afternoon as I was reviewing the monthly accounts, that a soft knock came at my office door. Come in. It was Mr. Shin. Over the years, his role had organically shifted from neighborhood committee director to my most trusted advisor and, truly, a grandfather to Chloe. His hair was more silver now, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. Maya, he said, holding a sheaf of papers. The paperwork for the new labeling is finally approved. No more homestyle designation. We're officially an industrial food producer. But he said the words with a mock solemnity that made me laugh. Thank you, Grandpa Shin, I said, using the title Chloe had bestowed upon him. I couldn't have navigated any of this without you. He waved a dismissive hand, but I saw the pleasure in his eyes. He sat down in the chair opposite my desk, his gaze drifting to the window that looked out over the busy factory floor. You know, he said, his tone thoughtful, when you first came to my office a scared woman with a child in her arms, I never would have dreamed of this. Neither would I admitted softly. I helped you because it was my duty, he continued. But I continued to help you because it has been my privilege. To watch you build this, it has been the greatest joy of my retirement. The air in the room shifted. It was not a dramatic shift but a gentle, quiet one, like the turning of a page. We had spent years side by side, a team bound by mutual respect and a shared love for a little girl. We had celebrated triumphs and weathered crises. In the quiet spaces between the work, a fondness had grown, deep and steady as an old tree. He reached across the desk and placed his hand over mine. His hand was warm, slightly rough with age. Maya, he said, his voice gentle but firm. This life you have built, it is magnificent. But it doesn't have to be a life you live alone. I looked at our hands, then up at his face. I saw no pity, no desperation, only a quiet, unwavering certainty. He wasn't offering to save me or protect me. He was offering to stand beside me. He was offering a partnership of equals. I thought of Mark's final desperate plea a lifetime ago. It had been a demand for redemption, a burden. This was different. This was an invitation to share a harvest we had both helped to plant. A sense of peace, profound and complete, settled over me. It was not the frantic excitement of first love, nor the bitter ashes of a love betrayed. It was the calm of a river reaching the sea. I turned my hand under his and laced my fingers through his. A slow, genuine smile spread across my face, one that felt like it reached every part of my soul. It doesn't, I said. And I don't think I want to anymore. That evening, the three of us, Chloe, Mr. Shin and I, ate dinner together in my courtyard, under the grapevine that was now a lush, green canopy. Chloe chattered about her day, her words tumbling over one another. Mr. Shin, Liang as he had asked me to call him now, listened with a patient smile, adding a comment here and there. I watched them, the two people who were my world, and I felt a gratitude so immense it was almost a physical presence. The path that had begun with such pain and betrayal had led me here, to this simple, profound happiness. I had gone to war with my past and in doing so had won my future. The sauce had been my salvation, but this quiet love, this chosen family, was my true fortune. I had not just built a business. I had built a life. And it was a life finally and completely of my own making. The end.